Hello, today is Tuesday, September 4th, 2018. I'm Joe Schmidt with TC2, and this is Staying Connected. On today's podcast, we are continuing with our series, Staying Ahead of the Demand for Network Cost Savings. In this educational podcast series, we've been revealing useful strategies to help enterprises achieve continuous network cost improvement and deliver world-class network infrastructure. I'm joined today by two of my TC2 colleagues, Theresa Knutson, a project director, and Bryan Carriker, one of TC2's senior consultants. And we are going to be discussing some things you need to consider when deploying telecom expense management in the enterprise. Now, if you have spent any time working the finer details of telecom, you know that contract compliance, that partially means checking your bills to make sure they reflect what's in your contract, that and the continual optimization of the services you purchase are critical processes for keeping your network costs as low as they can be. In many large companies, their strategies for these functions include the use of telecom expense management, which is typically referred to as TEM. So using TEM services and tools to process invoices, perform basic billing error checks, and sometimes provide certain inventory functions. When deployed effectively, these TEM services can be key contract compliance and optimization tools. However, these TEM services should really only be part of your toolkit, and they need to be combined with a range of activities and processes. So with that introduction, Theresa, can you share some areas that should be integrated with a company's traditional TEM lifecycle services to make them the most effective?
Sure. Thanks, Joe. So to extract the most value from the TEM services, they should be integrated with other key operational services. And the most important one is to be integrated with your MACD activity that's happening in your TEM environment. This is really important so that the TEM provider can confirm that the changes are correctly reflected in the supplier billings and that circuits are disconnected at the right intervals, and even only accepted circuits initiate billing. And as anyone knows in this field, maintaining an accurate inventory is key and very elusive if MACD information is not fed to the TEM provider. So that's absolutely the key process to include. The next one that I find is missing often is making sure that the TEM provider is actually receiving contract amendments as they're negotiated. If the TEM provider doesn't get the amendments, they're not auditing to the right rates and charges. And this thing seems very obvious, but often it's a very missed basic step. So make sure that your auditor has the right contracts and amendments so that they're auditing to the right rates and charges. The third one that I find is very key is to incorporate your TEM reporting and information into your vendor management process. So not only are you managing your TEM provider as a vendor, but use the information from the TEM provider to manage the underlying suppliers. Using this data is far more effective if you're doing it proactively versus waiting until there's a key issue that you're trying to resolve. So I find using reporting and talking to the suppliers and saying, hey, you're providing me this information from your systems, but I'm getting slightly different information from the TEM supplier. Being able to rationalize and make sure that those data points match is really important. And one of the most critical data reports that comes from a supplier is your commitment tracking report. It's key in maintaining your leverage throughout your deal. And what I find is that often is wrong. So rationalize your TEM provided information with your supplier provided information, and you'll be on the right track. Bryan, I think you also have a couple favorites that you like to see included in the TEM process.
Thanks, Theresa. And yes, I do like to see companies do a regular deep dive billing review. And really what the company needs to pursue there is auditing their TEM provider. You know, right now, TEM billing checks are quite simple. They largely focus on basic billing errors. Monthly TEM reviews aren't designed to do much more than that. Sometimes TEM services really only check to see that month over month the invoice amounts haven't changed by much. If you don't hit the thresholds set in the TEM software, then you won't catch those things. You know, we also see in enterprise contracts a wide scope and a very complex structures that TEM's tools cannot identify and can't track. Discount tiers, waivers, irregular credits, and then revenue incentives. Those aren't tracked. So we like to see that, and we see that even if the TEMS is tracking it, it often goes unpaid by the carriers. It's very important to conduct these periodic reviews and capture those billing errors and pick those up. We really want to focus on auditing the auditor.
So what about service optimization over and above catching the billing errors?
Proactive optimization review absolutely is essential. It's important to confirm that the billing's correct. A focused effort on understanding what you're purchasing and that you need what you're purchasing. We've seen large enterprises with disparate business units are routinely doing several things. We see closed or divested business units still being billed against the enterprise. And so we see capacity that's being purchased on a monthly basis that's not required. So a strong approach is really doing the invoice validation process, which we talked about auditing the auditor, but also doing a detailed review to make sure you're maximizing the results of the TEM implementation.
So, Brian, do you have a couple examples that you can share with our listeners?
Yeah, we've seen where vendors, every company out there that purchases circuits has to do upgrades. We see it every day. And so an upgrade is ordered, and the vendor installs a second circuit to accommodate that bandwidth increase. We are typically seeing, and it's not unusual to see, that both the old circuit and the new circuit continue to bill on the invoice. And so what we would recommend is to look at trends in your billing and take a look at the last 10 upgrades that you did. Are you seeing issues there? It's not uncommon to see those things. Another way that we found effective is taking the list of open and closed sites and match that up against your circuit inventory. Are you paying for circuits at a location that the site's closed? That's 100% waste right there.
All right, good stuff. Thanks, Brian. So, Theresa, do you have any additional thoughts or recommendations?
Sure. Absolutely, an integrated approach to TEM is key. The data and information that these activities and processes provide is hugely valuable for you for more strategic initiatives. So whether you're addressing complicated optimization activities or using the data as input to your technology transformation or pricing negotiations, having great information is critical. Next, I find that, as we talked earlier, contract compliance and optimization activities are largely about keeping your house in order. And it can be easy to neglect these activities and focus on the more interesting things like negotiating deals, doing technology transformations, and negotiations. Yet companies that don't put sufficient focus and effort into the basics end up leaving a huge amount of money on the table. And additionally, in our experience, companies that do an effective job of contract compliance and ongoing optimization end up with a far better understanding of their network infrastructure and services that they're consuming. Thus, they're more effective and successful in conducting RFPs, negotiating best-in-class deals, and actually delivering cost savings through transformation. So we also find that companies that do this process integrated and well end up with far healthier vendor relationships due to this very strategic management approach. So bottom line is that an effective TEM environment is about cost control and knowledge of your environment. You want to know what you pay for, and you only want to pay for what you need. So you can definitely outsource certain aspects of these processes, but the overall responsibility can't be outsourced. So keep your eye on the ball and work closely with your TEM supplier and all of the operational processes to make sure that they're linked.
Okay, thanks, Theresa, and thank you as well, Brian. I think this has been a great discussion about the importance of how enterprises use TEM and the other activities and processes that they need to consider. I should probably also mention that the next couple of podcasts will be expanding on some of these topics, so you, the listening audience, you don't want to miss those podcasts if this topic is of interest to you. And for our next podcast in this Staying Connected series, I'll be joined again by Theresa and our TC2 colleague, Julie Gardner, and we'll be talking about how to do a deep dive billing review, and we'll provide some service optimization tips. So please look out for messages from us providing links to the latest podcasts, or simply go to our websites. And then finally, if the listening audience would like to learn more about best practices for ICT procurements, or if you'd like to discuss other ICT needs with Theresa, Brian, me, or any of our LB3 and TC2 colleagues, please give us a call or shoot us an email. And you can also stay current by checking out our websites or follow us on LinkedIn.